to interact with our featured artist in that installation, Donald Black Jr. And let me just say a few words about Donald, and then he'll actually take over and interact with you, give some background to his work and activism, and you might be thinking of questions you'd like to ask or reactions you'd like to have, but I'm sure Donald himself will do that for you, set up some things. So Donald Black Jr. is an accomplished and award-winning photographer who expresses his activism through photography, and it's often mostly black and white images. He's well known for his photos of everyday black people doing ordinary things, which have been installed on large exterior buildings like the walls of public libraries in Cleveland, at the Cleveland Hopkins Airport, and in other large spaces. As we see today, these images are evocative and often flip the script, challenging the dominant narratives about black lives, especially the lives of children. Donald was the recipient of the 2007 International Nikon Award, and he founded the artist-run space Balance Point in Mount Pleasant, one of the neighborhoods where he has lived and grown up. On a personal note, I've had opportunity to work with and learn from Donald throughout the years, and I can tell you that he places great value in learning through tough conversations and allowing dialogue to take place in conflict as a way of forging a better way. So your honest and thoughtful conversation today will be one more chance for that. And so let's welcome Donald Black Jr. into the space, and I'll let him say a few words before we begin the interaction. So thank you, Donald.
You got on the microphone? Oh, hello. Let's see.
It might be
On. Hello. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for hanging out with me while y'all eat y'all lunch and listen to me talk about my photography. But I kind of want to start off talking a little bit about, I guess, activism or being political. And I want to kind of start with a backstory. I grew up, born and raised in Cleveland. I grew up on the southeast side of Cleveland. So I like to say I lived all the way from down the way all the way to Lee Road on the southeast side of Cleveland. And I was the student at school. I was the good kid. So I was the one that got to watch the class when the teachers left. I was the one that always got treats. I wound up graduating from high school with 13 years perfect attendance. I never missed a day of school. I was literally one of the young people in my environment that was getting special treatment, right? I wasn't being treated like all other black kids in my class because I was well behaved and I had good behavior. And I found myself at Cleveland School of the Arts by the age of 9, which is right across the street, University Circle, Cleveland School of the Arts. I went there from 4th grade to 12th grade. I was a visual artist. I had already been drawing obsessively by the time I entered Cleveland School of the Arts as a 9-year-old. And when I turned 13, I was able to start to go into the dark room, which is, the red room where you see pictures pop up and get printed and all that kind of stuff. So from Cleveland School of the Arts, already studying photography, I found myself at OU, Ohio University, Athens, Ohio. And I guess me getting to Athens, Ohio, OU, is when I started to experience racism in a way that I didn't understand it prior to getting to Ohio University. I found myself recognizing and observing what different ethnic groups did on campus and how segregated everything was and where the black students were or like we called it Little Africa versus where the white kids was at and who played volleyball versus who played basketball. At the time I got to college, I didn't realize how much I had already, I guess, kind of mastered and studied how we move amongst each other but still kind of divided, right? Now, I'm going from Cleveland School of the Arts. Coming from Cleveland, Ohio, southeast side of Cleveland. I don't really interact with a lot of white people. I get to OU, like 9% or less than 6% minority on a campus of on average, about 18 to 20,000 people. and I didn't necessarily really understand what being a part of a minority group even meant, let alone to be, 6 to 8% of one. So all my classmates were white. All my friends were black. I cut hair. So I was around all of the football players, all of the basketball players, and I was very popular based on me cutting hair. And then me being the only black kid in the class, I started to realize that there's no black people on the board every week during critique unless I put one on the board. And once I recognized that, it made me not want to photograph my white mod mates and the kids that I was in class with, because I started to feel some kind of responsibility to make sure it was a black person on the board in class. Now, I'm consciously photographing black people probably for the first time, even though I'm like 5-6 years into formal photography training. I mean, I had been taking pictures of my family and taking pictures of my mom with her Polaroid camera since I was a small child. But now I'm like consciously saying, well, I want to make sure it's another black person in class. And what I experienced coming from the background of being the good kid, the one who's always picked, the one who's always selected, the one who, fucks up the curve for everybody. That's just kind of who I was, only in my creative classes. Like my academic classes, if I had to pass it, I was gonna get a C. If I enjoyed it, math, I was getting an A. I came out of school, high school and college with a B average based on A's, C's, and D's. You know what I'm saying? So, thank you, sir. Yeah. So ultimately, this is the experience of race and racism that I don't even know is actually affecting me and affecting my work. So by the time I'm finishing up at OU, I am replacing all my fashion classes because I'm feeling like fashion and makeup and models is meaningless, because I'm like at OU, a part of the largest drug trade that happened based on my proximity to all of the people whose hair I was cutting. So I had a friend of mine get murdered, and when the detectives brought me in, they showed me my face under surveillance, pictures. They were following me, taking pictures, and said, you were the #1 visited location for this whole trade. And I'm sitting there thinking like, oh wow, who else is having this experience? And all I could think is the white people that I knew were not having this same experience. So I leave OU, I moved to New York. I'm trying to figure out how not to move back to Cleveland because I didn't want to be pulled emotionally from all of the people that I love to death who can't figure out whatever they can't figure out, who kind of lean on me emotionally. So I waited 5 years before I moved back to Cleveland. So in moving back to Cleveland, I'm actively telling myself I want to take pictures of what I wish I would have took pictures of when I was a child. So when I was at Cleveland School of the Arts with the camera, we didn't get to take the cameras home, and we took pictures. I mean, I would just say we kind of took pretty pictures. It was a lot of technical exercises. So my work illustrated a lot of technical exercises. So in me moving back to Cleveland in my late 20s, I'm like wanting to take the pictures that I wish I would have took as a child. So I'm taking pictures of family, friends, people around me. I'm carrying the camera probably for the first time in my life. And now I'm trying to take pictures of what Cleveland looks like to me, or the part of Cleveland that I see. And ultimately, I had been studying photography formally. 27, 28? So I had been studying photography formally for about 15 years. And what I recognized is the void of representation of people of color from our own perspective, right? So yeah, history books got people of all shades in it, but oftentimes the photographs are being created from an outsider's perspective. That's what I feel like I recognize. That's the void I felt like I wanted to start to fill with my images. Now, moving back to Cleveland and out of college, most people are taught how to get a job working for whoever you're gonna wind up working for. Well, I was realizing that the galleries, the museums, National Geographic, Time, all these places that I was taught to pursue weren't looking for the pictures that I was taking. And if they were interested in the pictures that I was taking, they wanted me to take more pictures in a different way. So I always say, I got a lot of photographs of my family members, but these places ultimately want dirty panties and roaches on the floor is what I perceive they're asking me for, when they're asking me to get a little closer, and I'm not sure you're actually attacking your subject yet, right? So in my 20s, I'm still a student in my mind because I'm still asking what I'm supposed to be doing, looking for validation and affirmation that what I'm doing is right from an outside source, ultimately those sources being some form of a systematic institution, just ultimately either rejecting me or telling me that I need to surrender in order to be accepted. So my habit as an artist up to my 20s is every time something pissed me off, I would go make something. So when I'm living in New York and I show my portfolio to a magazine and the white young lady tells me I need to photograph more white people, it made me mad. So I started photographing black people in blackface. Now, mind you, I'm thinking I'm doing something revolutionary by doing that. And then years later, I realized that all I'm doing is perpetuating the system in a second way. So in my 20s, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm painting black people in blackface. And at 42, I'm sitting there like, that was the dumbest fucking shit I could have did, because I didn't recognize how my mind was already indoctrinated into hating myself and inferiority complex and all that other kind of stuff. So every single time I'm upset, I'm going and I'm shooting things. And now I'm like living back in Cleveland. I'm learning the formal art world. I'm learning art education, coming from being a product of it, of that system. And in me kind of being upset at continuously being rejected from a system that when I was not flipping the table over, or when I was getting perfect attendance, and when I passed out the treats and watched the classroom, that same system is looking at me like, Donald, this is making me uncomfortable. These pictures you're taking are making me uncomfortable. And I'm not understanding why I'm making the system that I was brought up in uncomfortable by showing the images that mean something to me. In my mind, I'm doing what I was doing when I was 13 years old. I'm doing the same thing. I got, directors of institutions in the art world saying, Donald, we want to do a story on you. You're the activist artist. You're the political artist. And then they put a photograph that I took of my best friend's nephew reading a book at a dining room table. And that was like the illustration of Donald Black Jr., the activist artist. And I'm like, well, what the fuck is activism got to do with me taking this picture of Little Bryce? Like, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Now, I'm not a person who feels like I need to agree or disagree. I often say when you disagree with something, you don't understand it. I think a lot of what we experience is perspective. So I'm trying to figure out how to see myself as an activist and as political. And I'm like, okay, so well, maybe when I learned that the likelihood of a black man going to jail is based on his ability to read, right? In close proximity with my dad simultaneously for the first time since I was a child, who passed away illiterate, who had been to jail so many times that when me and my friends got beat up and arrested by the Cleveland police on West 6th on my 30th birthday, my lawyer didn't believe that I didn't have a criminal record. I had never been arrested. And when he came to a meeting, he says, see, you've been to jail 50 times. I said, no, that's probably my father. He's like, yeah, right. I'm like, no, it's probably my dad. He's like, when is his birthday? I'm like, October 6th. He's like, oh shit, this is your father. So all this is happening simultaneously with me trying to figure out just this idea that I'm an activist and activism and political. Because at this point in time, I'm scared to be activist, political, because all of my political superheroes, they had killed them at 39. So I'm like 36, 37 years old, scared that people are saying, oh, you remind me of another dead motherfucker. Like, I'm sitting there uncomfortable. So I'm like, okay, let me back away from these institutions. Let me take pictures of what I think I'm supposed to take pictures of and just do what I feel like I also ultimately was always doing, which is following the photographs. If I don't trust people, the world around me, I take the pictures and I try to learn what's next from the pictures. So I met my wife at an after-school program. She was teaching an all-girls program, and me falling in love with that program and ultimately falling in love with the director of the program. I was like, man, there's no boys programs. What are young men doing? You know what I'm saying? Like, what are we doing other than playing sports and smoking weed and all the young men around me? So I paid attention to the bike. And I was already riding a bike. I was teaching workshops. I'm telling kids, you know, they like, Mr. Black, why are you on a bike? You got a truck. I'm like, I'm trying to live to 100. Like, that's just what I'm saying to them. They don't know that when I'm riding up the hill from Newbridge back to Shaker, I'm like throwing up on the side of my house because I didn't have a wind for it. But my thought is I'm already on a bike. What's the boys program? Kids popping willies in the neighborhood. I'm trying to figure out what Cleveland looks like to me. So to me, it just all made sense. Start taking pictures of the kids popping willies. Start taking pictures of the dirt bikes popping willies, because every time I see a dirt bike the time before I started photographing, every time I would see a dirt bike, I would miss it. And I grew up around dudes popping willies on dirt bikes. And I can remember being a 5-year-old kid over my cousin's house on Maud Auburn, and they would go up and down the hill popping willies on MLK to 93rd. So it's something that's always been a part of my perception of what it meant to be, I guess, me or like my cousins growing up. So I started to photograph them. And I like to talk in goals, problems, challenges, solutions, advice kind of a thing. So I'm talking from the perspective of being an artist, but ultimately I think this is kind of universal conversation. So the goal was another subject matter other than foreclosure, because that was something I was photographed a lot of the foreclosure crisis in Cleveland. I kept thinking to myself, like, what photographer has trained their entire life in the way that I have, with the access to the environment the way that I have it in Cleveland, taking pictures? I found myself feeling like I was in my own lane. So I just was picking different topics. Foreclosure was one of them. Bikes is another. I mean, it's a whole list of them. So what I did is I wanted another illustration of what represented Cleveland, but I also wanted an illustration of what represented something that I hadn't been expressing in my work, because I didn't learn how to express it in my work when I was at Cleveland School of the Arts, which was anger, rage, violence, and freedom, right? So I'm looking in the environment trying to figure out where I see anger, rage, violence, freedom represented. And that's what really, really drew me to the bikes, because I felt like that's the only time I was experiencing it. I mean, I kind of am feeling like out of all of the shit that's going on in the country, in the city, in the neighborhoods, it's like nobody's saying anything. Nobody really seems to be expressing themselves in a way that is what I would call like raising the flag of the conversation even higher. You know, I feel like there are people in place and conversations in place that are having the conversations, but I didn't feel like they were being had in a way that could start to really, really draw bigger audiences. I had a desire to be a part of that. So I reached out and I found out who was like one of the people coined for running the dirt bike culture in Cleveland, and I got in the pickup truck and got chased by the police and helicopters over our heads, and I'm watching the guys on the dirt bikes argue about what messed up neighborhood they gonna go to next. And every corner we stopped at had a pack of little black boys waiting on them to show up, all with their phones to record. The conversations are being coordinated through Instagram. And to me, it was mind blowing to me because, you know, I'm not seeing the guys on dirt bikes the way the city was seeing them, but I didn't really know what was really happening, what was really going on. I mean, to me, I called the age group of predominantly black men from the ages of 9 to 35. I call it the Black Panther demographic, right? So we hear all these half-ass rumors about the Black Panthers and Black Nationals, and you know, we are taught how to see political activism from black people by way of the Panthers. I've been fortunate enough to kind of learn some of Cleveland's history and learn about organizations like Ambrose Land, who's from 55th and Huff, and you know, these 17, 18-year-olds used to stake out the top of the project buildings and not let the police the environment. They had to meet somebody at a barricade at the end of the street. And I'm just sitting there thinking like, oh, this is amazing to know this, because ultimately me feeling like I carry the energy of neighborhoods in Cleveland and the people around me carry them. I'm thinking like, where is this coming from? And it's like, oh, our grandparents, this is the energy. This is what was going on. This is what was happening the year I was born. And I'm like, oh, this is what the outside environment is seeing as political, right? So me trying to figure out who I am, me trying to be an individual, me trying to be myself, me trying to express myself as what the country calls a black man, that's the part that's political. Like I'm already in a political system and lived situation. So the moment I'm talking, I'm an activist and I'm political. And I think what happened is the more I've learned how to channel how I feel through a very, very comfortable way for me to express, I would imagine that the less I started to feel like afraid to say whatever the fuck I want to say whenever I feel like it needs to come out. Because what I learned from my lawyer is if I ain't getting 50 numbers coming up smacking people, my dad passed away a couple years ago, banned from the casino, banned off of the public transportation for what he would call, I just smacked him up a couple times, son. I ain't fuck him up, I just smacked him. You know, in my mind, it's like the least I could be doing is saying what I have to say, especially when it doesn't only represent me, because ultimately the way I was brought into the projects of Cleveland and what I come up around and the experiences that I have, I'm supposed to be, just another, I guess, stereotype of what a black man is supposed to be and how we behave and that sort of thing. I carry all of the same energy. I've learned to express it a different way. I've had a lot of people to learn from. I've had a lot of people to share who they really are with me so I can get an insider's perspective of what the, I guess, repercussions or consequences are, not really having a way to express or articulate yourself. So that's how we got to the bikes. And yeah, I felt like the bikes need another voice, a part of the conversation, because I've talked to the old mayor and the old chief of police and Shaker police, and they got me on the scanner in the middle of the night as the leader of the stolen bike community, and the kids are stealing the bikes and they bring them to my house. And the way I guess law enforcement are manipulated and taught to see black people of color as criminals, I just get to experience it in real time. I don't have no warrants. I ain't got nothing that I'm hiding, so I don't really have to carry the same level of guilt creating, bad behavior kind of a thing. So I'm glad to be a representative of a demographic and be able to be a voice, an active voice and participant, as what the country sees as a black man. I could keep talking, but I kind of wanted to open this up to thoughts, conversation. I don't know who saw the show. I don't know who see the dirt bikes. I don't know who know what I'm talking about when I'm talking Willie culture. So yeah, I don't know, just thoughts. What's on y'all mind?
Should I use the mic and pass it? Can we, let's see if we can hear you. Okay.
Hello everyone, my name is Jada. I'm currently at the law school, and I just wanted to thank you for sharing your story. I did not have an opportunity to watch the film or anything, but I'm from Cincinnati. It's the same type of culture there. Whenever you see a young black African American men on these bikes, it's always head turning, but no one wants to continue the conversation of the art and the historic nature of why these young men are on the bike. Sometimes it can be a situation where, okay, why are you in the middle of the street? You need to comply with the laws, and that's a form of resistance for these young men. And I feel like that's something that we have to consider and talk about, because if it's a procession of bike runners or racers, they can do what they want. But just because I'm popping willies makes me a disruption to society. So I would like to open up with that.
They don't know anything about cases, so.
About what?
They don't know anything about the case that we handled, even though they're from the law school, so however you wanna.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, there's so many stories. Where to go from there? So when me being a part of the culture, it's one level it's one level to look at it and people experience it as an act of resistance, right? But then the question that pops in my mind is, if I don't know that if I don't know that something is resistant to me, is the expression of my behavior an act of resistance, right? I'm listening to people argue all the time about why the police messing with us? We just on bikes, we just riding bikes, right? And I'm thinking to myself, like, damn, you can't believe that you just riding bikes. Like, you can't really believe that they messing with you just because you popped a wheelie. And then I'm sitting there thinking to myself, the situations I've been in with the police on my bike. I mean, I've been stopped on my pedal bike 15 times. Popping wheelies, not popping wheelies, right? So normally people's first question is, so why did they stop you, Donald? And then it's just like a mind fuck of a question, because I feel like it doesn't matter if I was popping wheelies, if I was standing on a corner, if I had a do-rag on, if I was all of these other, 95 experiences I've had with the police. So that's one level that I'm very intrigued by, is the act of resistance. So then it's kind of like, okay, so is this some level of an internal resistance, because is my subconscious, creating the expression of resistance, even though I don't realize that I'm in an environment that my expression is viewed as political? And then I'm thinking to myself, of course, the obvious, when I'm riding with 600 white folks, they not stopping us. But if I'm riding with 20 black kids, we on a 45-minute police chase through 3 suburbs with 6 cars following us to slam one kid and throw another one off a bike, arrest them, for me to call Aisha and then say, hey, can you kind of help us out of this situation that I took to one of the police departments to try to prevent this from even happening. So it's interesting, because I feel like the expression of whatever if we are looking at ourselves like computers, input, output, whether we are conscious of what the input is, or whether we're conscious of what the output or the expression is, I think it's happening whether we are aware of it or not. And I think there's a level of freedom in really feeling like, I'm just riding a bike. Like, I'm just on a bike. Like, I got people like Donald. I mean, I just got out of jail. I got numbers on me. And the only way I ain't been back to jail is for me to get on this dirt bike and get chased by the police. You know what I'm saying? And it's not somebody he's not trying to be funny when he's saying this. And I get it. If I'm not robbing, killing, shooting, and doing all this other stuff, what's the big deal about what I hear him saying is, what's the big deal about me being free, right? And then it's like, damn, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's the whole political law enforcement problem when it comes to people of color, especially black folks, is the ability to be free, the ability to think, to see ourselves the way we experience ourselves. So I appreciate that comment in terms of what's going on in Cincinnati, because to me, if I'm looking at the little that I know about civil rights movement and the timeline associated with it, my thought is for the 45, for the 50 and unders, it's like, who's saying, like, in a real way that we can feel, who's saying that I'm not going to be suppressed, and I'm not going to suppress myself, and I'm not going to have to be oppressed, not to express what my body feels like needs to come out. It's amazing for me to watch, see, participate in, and experience. I mean, I just bought my first dirt bike 3 days ago. Yeah. Anybody else thoughts or?
Yeah,
Regina?
so when you talk about your work kind of being universal, and I definitely believe it definitely is. Just kind of looking from a grander scheme of kind of how the conversations we're having, and that how some people can view these youth on these bikes and it's kind of maybe being troublesome, right? So I kind of always have this thought in my mind, and I don't know if you would think of it in terms of teaching, but it's like if you have a population or a community of people who have never experienced or been exposed to this, and even though I'm posing a question, I'm not asking you to answer it, but it's like, can that really ever be taught, right? Like if I
Can
grew
what
up in
be
a
taught?
neighborhood,
What be taught?
can these experiences ever be taught in a way that when you have people that encounter these groups of youth that can understand them, right? So let's say if I was, definitely, not trying to be offensive, but if I was like a white woman, I grew up in an all-white community, went to all-white school, and then I encounter, these group of youth on these bikes or whatever, what have you, or I'm charged with managing a group of African-American staff. It's kind of like if I've never been exposed to these experiences, I've never had to live these experiences, can that really ever be taught? I don't know if you kind of understand where I'm
No, I understand.
because I'm sorry, not to cut it, because I try to always come from a place where sometimes people genuinely just don't understand, right? Like I feel like a lot of times we're charged with the responsibility of things that we have genuinely never been taught. And sometimes it is genuinely people's story, right? And so it's kind of like if you've never been exposed to certain things, can it really ever be taught?
So my mind is gonna go a couple different directions. I mean, they went a couple different directions. So my thought with being an artist, right, is that I used to think that I was supposed to be trying to teach people what I'm doing. And then I realized that it's not my responsibility to teach people what I'm doing. If they are in a place where they can allow themselves to experience it, then they do. And if they're not, then they don't. So that was one place my mind went, but another one was an argument that I had with a very, very, very famous National Geographic's photographer. And we argued over the idea of me and him as two black men. I think he's maybe like Jamaican born, who our audience is supposed to be. So he's kind of coming to me saying, black people, we already know who we are. So what you showing black people for? You need to be showing them, right? This is what he's saying to me. And I'm like, I think they might have a better understanding of who we are than we do ourselves, right? And I feel like the systems that are at play echo an understanding of who we are. And the systems that are at play seem to make it harder for Donald to understand who I am for myself. So that's my response to our back and forth and our argument. The way I experience being alive, being myself, is I don't care if you don't understand, because I know that the only way to understand anything is to experience it. But I think oftentimes we, in a very lazy way, people just generally think that they want to figure something out and they want to understand something without the experience that's attached to the understanding. Only because I feel like it's some white fairy godmothers specifically around this culture who are very offended at the depiction of the kids that go to the schools that they're the teachers and psychologists of. And then when I'm around them, I'm like, oh, you're experiencing it. You on the Cleveland Remembrance page. You know what happened to whoever 2 weeks ago. Like, you're not someone who is in the environment with young black children and leaving. You having dreams about this, and you saying the same stuff the people around me saying, because you are not trying to understand it. They're experiencing it. So I feel you. I don't think some people who've never been, I don't think it's something that can be taught, right? I think it's something that has to be experienced. And I feel like with the lack of it's like some people live in a way that they don't have to experience it, right? You're not forced to. You're not with the lack of force. You don't have to experience it, so you'll never understand it. I feel like for me, being a person of color, I realize that I've been in enough conversations to realize it's not my responsibility. It's like you got to go do a whole lot of homework. It's YouTube University and a whole bunch of books breaking down exactly what's going on. Yeah.
Just wondering if you could talk a little bit. You mentioned, at least if I'm understanding correctly, that if there are encounters during police, they bring the young kids to your house. Did I understand that?
No, what happened is, I don't know what part was happening, but there's always encounters with the police. They don't bring them to my house, but I guess in a similar way that I was the #1 visited location for the whole drug trade when I was cutting hair in college, I'm kind of looked at as the person that the kids are stealing bikes and bringing the bikes to. I'm thinking that's probably what I was talking about in terms of coming to my house, because the kids come to my house.
Okay.
So my association and affiliation with fixing the bikes, working on the bikes, helping kids get bikes, patches, all this other stuff has turned me into, the #1 visited location for criminal activity based on the way law enforcement is taught to perceive me.
What do you shoot with
What do I shoot with as far as
your camera?
I shoot with any camera that I got, ultimately. I got 38 years into the camera, so I'm shooting mirrorless, digital SLR, I'm shooting with the phone, I'm shooting with a GoPro, I'm shooting with my sunglasses, all simultaneously. So I'm so twisted into the technology that I have a different camera for a different reason, and I usually got them with me and around me, not sure what the environment is gonna be to capture, record, and that sort of thing. So I'm like, I'm content creation before it existed. I'm a social media influencer who just got on social media, but I adopted all of the behaviors as a kid. I got 100 terabytes of photography at my house. Probably about 15 cameras, 10 printers, all the way to 64 wide. I got 7 years worth of audio recorded of conversations that I have if it was to play on an endless loop. Like technology and camera and documentation is something that has really been my whole life. Not even really knowing it. I just have started to create directions with it, with probably in like the last, I guess intentional direction, maybe in like the last 15 years. But I guess this idea or need or desire to capture what I'm seeing and what I'm experiencing, because I don't really agree with the perception of what's being said about what I'm around and what I'm capturing, has grown that desire. I'm not shooting poverty. I'm not shooting at risk. Like, I realize that all these labels are attached to imagery of people. I'm not doing any of that stuff. But I was being taught that I was. I was fortunate enough to have an experience at what I would call the Rucker of photography, where I'm in a room of all of the people running the photography world, and an older Mexican guy showed him some of my work, and I started talking about at risk and poverty or whatever I said, and he said, "Don't tell me the bullshit you tell white people." And I'm like, oh, wow. And he said, "You know what I'm saying to you?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Prove to me you know what I'm saying to you." I sit down and show him my portfolio. This is his response. I said, "Well, I was brought up in a formal photography education training situation, and I was learning to talk about myself and learning to talk about my work based on what they were saying." I said, "But when I'm at home and around all the people that I've been knowing forever, I say something different." I said, "So you telling me to quit saying what I'm telling them and tell you what I tell the people that I'm around?" He said, "Okay, now sit down, Mr. Black. Let's have a conversation about the work." And it was why I went on that trip. to that event is for somebody who recognized my habit of hiding who I am, just kind of blatantly calling it out. I mean, the fact that he said, shit, this, don't tell me the bullshit. I was like, oh my goodness, you speak my language. So, yeah. What y'all do? Who in here? Y'all in social justice? Y'all, like, what y'all doing in college?
Law student.
Law student? Law student? Law student?
Well, I sound outnumbered.
Social work. Gotcha.
A biochem major?
What kind of major?
Biochem.
Oh, biochem, okay.
We're all here pursuing like a social justice minor, and then also I'm an international and environmental.
Social justice minor. So where y'all at with content creation and all that? Y'all ain't like YouTube University, I'm about to have 1 million followers and do this whole system thing a whole nother kind of way, just out of curiosity. Because in my mind, if I would have had access to what y'all got access to, I would already be on CNN at freaking 22. Is that play a role, or are we very much in like the old world, new world kind of a paradigm? What y'all think?
I think it's evolving. I feel like with the content creators and influencers, everybody's trying to do it, so there's no real uniqueness to it. I find more uniqueness in walking into an art show than I do seeing people on Instagram reels.
Okay.
It seems like it's kind of played out in a sense to me. I wake up in the morning, I do this is my routine, and it's like, okay, besides that, who are you?
And
That's
I think-
interesting.
Yeah, and I think it kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier, that authenticity, right? With people, sometimes when you think about content creation, it's being created out of what people want to see.
Right,
Who
versus.
are you? And sometimes
Right,
you
right,
think
right.
your story is so unique that it will be frowned upon, but you never know who may need your story.
Right, because it's interesting because for me, so I've probably had about 200 exhibitions since I was a kid. And I have an exhibition next door. It's very old world. It's so old world. It ain't pop culture at all. From someone who's been, I mean, I was the prodigy, creative, artistic kid all the way till I got in the classroom with all white kids. I've been being rejected and losing anything that I've applied and submitted to ultimately ever since. I learned a different definition and I started to hear the word submission in a different way, right? And it's like, why do I keep submitting? One of my favorite quotes off The Wire was, you can't lose if you don't play, right? So then it was kind of like, okay, so, but what am I gonna do if I don't either bend to the system of art exhibitions and that sort of thing? How do I be myself? How do I not bend to the system? And how do I pursue and continue to manifest my dream of being a lifelong living artist with the exception of being taken advantage of, and the system owns all the rights to all my stuff and they celebrate me when I'm 90. Like, so that was literally what I've been trying to figure out. And I wasn't on social media because I've been had cameras. You know, I already had the digital addiction to consuming content and all that kind of stuff. I wasn't on social media with it. And for me to start to learn social media in like the last 4 years, it's like, oh, this is a continuum of me realizing that at 21, I needed to buy a digital camera if I wanted to continue to exist as a photographer long enough to figure out what I'm gonna do with this camera. It's like, oh, the digital economy, digital economics, creator economy is what I wish I would have had when I was little in college, because I am realizing that now I can just be myself and I can share it. So I'm trying to adopt the habit. I'm trying to get my screen hours up. When I'm watching young people around me, I'm like, man, you got 8 hours on there? Like, can I get $50 an hour? I can you post some content for me? You know, that kind of a thing. So it's interesting to me to see it, I guess to kind of almost maybe be born into it, or to be born at a time period where you always had access to it, almost to where it might be hard to see, I guess, what it is a continuum of. And when I'm in shows and I do shows, all I'm thinking is it's real outdated. And then I've been a part of situations that are using both old world and new world, where I was in Miami at an art exhibition and a concert, and they brought me in to shoot, to display work, and all I'm thinking is, well, when are these dudes gonna promote this event? Ain't nobody sent out no flyers, ain't nobody put up no postcards, ain't nobody asked for no promotion. So I'm just anticipating all this money on this event being spent with nobody there. When I get to the event, I mean, it was the most packed exhibition experience I've ever seen. And then I kind of learned how the content creators are monetizing being content creators and sharing followings. And it's like 5,000 people at this club that's got a boxing ring built in the middle of it. I mean, it was amazing. It was like, oh, it's not one or the other. And I think a lot of people my age are on one side of it. And I think a lot of people on the 25 and unders, 30 and unders are kind of on the other side of it. Like, oh, it might be kind of played. I'm here to tell you that what I'm learning is this is like the Industrial Revolution. And the Industrial Revolution is phasing out. That's why all of the factories are in the state that the factories are in. Is why the city of Cleveland is in the state that the city of Cleveland is. Any city similar, because the engine creating money is phasing out, and the new engine is digital economics, and we're at the beginning of it. So when it looks like Instagram has been out for 13 years, it's 13 years with another 150 to go. So it's way earlier than I think we know. It's interesting because that's all I'm in school right now with digital economics and all that kind of stuff. Just because ain't nobody, these museums, these institutions are gonna it's gonna be a long time before they're saying, Donald, let us see what's on them 100 terabytes of what you've accumulated since you was 23. And now I don't have to wait.
One or two more comments? They're good, I guess.
Can I ask one technical question?
Definitely.
About my favorite piece? I don't think it's, I love all of them, but there's one that I'm quite intrigued by, where the young man's hand is down, he's all the way up.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanna know, did he get back on the bike, or did he fall?
Oh, when he was alive. I think it's, yeah, I know what you
It's
mean.
up here.
Yeah, here, no, here.
Oh, yeah.
You know which one I'm talking about?
Yeah,
Where
yeah,
his
yeah.
hand is like grazing the ground?
Yep, yeah, he got back up.
Okay.
So when we doing the tricks on the bikes, the whole thing is not only doing the trick, but it's being able to land the trick.
Right.
So like when he's up right there, okay, that's cool that he can get up, but can he sit back down and start pedaling? So
Here it is, down.
right. So this is Tay. So he gonna smash the brake and it's gonna pop him back up. So he landed the trick. I mean, that's why everybody's sitting there with their mouth open behind them. The interesting thing of me about the pictures and the people in the pictures is that young man is amazing on the bike. He was in so much trouble at Harvey Rice when we met. He was swerving the principal, coming down the middle of Buckeye on a regular basis. So for maybe about a year, he was around us a lot. The principal talking about what he doing in school. The principal asked me, why do these kids know who you are? Like, when I ride my bike to do workshops to the school, and I pop wheelies at like 2 to 4 o'clock, so buses are always seeing me. Like, so I'm kind of doing that subconsciously, not realizing that they really looking. And we will have a lot of conversations about this young man. So he stole an iPod from my house one day. But then he came back over, he had this whole scam of helping me find it and all this different stuff. But he was like one of few that I was even letting in the garage, right? And it kind of really, and then I wound up, when he cut it on, maybe 2 weeks later, it pinged right to his house. I showed up to start talking to his mother. He didn't left out the house, ran out of the house. After all, like, so it was interesting watching the experience we were having, because then he stopped coming around as much. And it wasn't because I said you can't come around. It was more so whatever he was dealing with, the fact that he did it and got caught. Start breaking into houses, and then is in juvie. So me and my buddy, we always kind of talking about what we're doing and what we, and my buddy more than me, not really being aware to the extent that the day-to-day active behavior, the interaction with each other, this big group of black men that we're around, and the necessity for it to exist. Because, you know, a lot of people that we're around, this is the only thing that exists. Because we just got a call from somebody, that kid right there, the front one, the one in the front. He just called from juvie. I mean, he got caught with 21 guns in East Cleveland. They gave him 11 years. We talked to him 3 days ago, and he's saying it wasn't enough for y'all. That's what he said. So it's interesting, because I don't say this often, but the truth of it is, when I'm photographing the people around me, I know I'm photographing people who gonna die. And we all gonna die, but I recognize that the people around me are more likely to die in an unnatural and very early way. I mean, I got my cousin on my chest. You know what I'm saying? And he passed away very unnatural, you know, accidental overdose. Percocet with fentanyl in it, with a diet full of Molly. But I know what happened to him in the projects when he was 3, when he was 4. I know what was happening to him when he was 7. I know that his dad had an accidental overdose, who was my father's best friend. But what's happening is the conversations don't even get had. I kind of been using being an artist as a way to carry and express the conversations. Subconsciously, I'm not even doing it on purpose. It's kind of like, oh, I'm about to put my cousin on this morning. You know, I make a lot of rest in peace t-shirts as a printer in the neighborhood. And I never wore any until my cousin passed away. And it's like, oh, this is what everybody is feeling walking around with all these t-shirts on. I've been making them for people since I learned to screen print at 25. So it's I guess, I mean, I get the activism part as being an artist, especially if you're an artist or a creative person or anybody who's saying that, okay, these are the rules. And rules aside, what are the things that are needed? What are the things that are necessary? When I saw Angela Davis come here a few years ago, I feel like when she said, like, I mean, I took in the entire lecture, but the only thing to me that she said is, we need people to be trying to think of the unrealistic and the impossible, because that's where the solutions are, is in the unrealistic and the impossible. Because if we keep the stuff, if we don't even identify what the unrealistic and impossible is, then we aren't really coming up with maybe new solutions to anything. Yeah. Thank you. I'm good. Y'all good? All right.
Thank you so much, Donald. We talk about emancipatory research sometimes in the academy, and I have this vision of having community scholars who are part of and affiliated with our university. And I think we've experienced, my humble opinion is, you are a community scholar that we're learning from about how to do emancipatory research. So
Thank you. Thank
for
you.
being with us. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome to hang around, get more food.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I knew that. This is my vision, what you're doing.
I would love